So, welcome back to Slop Shop. What we have here is a Speeduino. I am going to be completely honest with you and tell you that this is my second Speeduino. The first one here I soldered together, and it is the first time I ever soldered anything, and it doesn't work. So I don't know what I did wrong. I don't know what's wrong with it, but I don't feel like screwing around with it for the $50 that it costs. So let's get into this. I am going to open this baby up. The main thing that I noticed while I've been starting to do this is a NO2C board that you know, I just really haven't been able to find a whole lot of information online about them. You know, I mean, there's plenty of stuff, don't get me wrong, but for the guy that's just for the very first time getting into this, it could probably be very what's the word I'm looking for, daunting, or, you know, it's just a lot to get your head wrapped around at first. So I'm going to attempt to give you guys kind of an idea of how this goes together, and hopefully I can get it right the second time around. So this is your, if you order this NO2C, it's going to ask you whether you want, what kind of PCB or what kind of connector you want. So this is the actual solder on PCB connector. This will solder right onto the board, and then you can connect your harness to this feller and go from there. This is the actual board itself that, you know, you do all your soldering with. Here you solder everything to. And then after that, you get a whole bunch of stuff. Map sensor. Let's see if we can cut this baby open. So, I'll try to cut this baby open. Try to keep it in front of the camera here. So when you order this board, it'll ask you if you want a map sensor included, or you can use your own whatever standalone map. I opted to get the one that solders right on the board. Don't forget the sticker that comes with. I have two of those now because I screwed up the first one. Put that there, and then this bag here is just all the components that get soldered onto this board. So if you're like me and the first time you open this up, you're like, what the hell did I just get myself into? And for the most part, you're not wrong. But once you actually look into it, it's super simple. It's really simple. So the bags here, so these are your drivers. Yeah, this is like a little computer chip, and it'll tell you right here that this goes to IC1 on the board. And if you look, here's IC2. So then IC1, you can see there's a little label. I don't know if you'll be able to actually see that or not. Maybe. If I get my camera to focus. Sorry for my disgusting fingernails. IC1 here, that's where that board would go. So you pop that baby in there, you solder in, and away you go. I have the kind of Speeduino wiki, if you would, pulled up on my computer. Or I'm going to here in a second. I'm unprepared. Sorry, bear with me. Elevator music. So if you just Google, if you just Google Speeduino, Speeduino wiki, it'll bring you up the Speeduino manual. And I am going to go through here and sort out all the resistors. This is not a resistor, not a resistor, that's a transistor. We're close, but not quite. Driver. These are capacitors, sockets, more capacitors, more capacitors, capacitor, 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 connector. Ooh, we got our first resistor here. More resistors, more resistors. Oh yeah, now we're getting there. So resistor, resistor. What do we got? More resistors. Ooh, diode. We don't want that yet. We don't want diodes. We want resistors. We don't want diodes. We want resistors. More resistors. LEDs, which would an LED would be a diode, which we don't want yet. Jumpers, we don't want those, or header sockets. So if you break it down like that, here's your first step right here. All these resistors. And like I said earlier, I don't want to start with the resistor networks. I want to start with the plain old resistors. So this is where I'm going to start here. Here is resistors 1, 2, 4, and 6. So go ahead and pop those babies out of the bag. And then we will take these out of the paper that they come in. And fire up the old solder station. I've got my soldering iron set to a little over 800 degrees. This is a Harbor Freight $50 soldering iron. The first one I did with a cheapo Amazon, like $10 one, and I think the tips were super cheap and they just oxidized super quick, or I didn't know what I was doing and they oxidized super quick, but either way, it did not work out. So I bought this $50 one and I've done some soldering with it and it actually works out much better. So I guess my recommendation to you would be to get a little bit nicer, not the bottom of the barrel, but like midway. So as you can see here on the board, those R1, 2, 4, 6, they're all right along here. So basically what you're going to do, you're going to take your resistors, and I like to bend them beforehand, and then stick them through. This is called a through hole component. And you just kind of finagle with it and get it where you want it. And then you bend the legs over to where it doesn't fall out. So I'm going to go ahead and do that with all the resistors on the board. We're going to solder it in, and then I will bring you back in. I have the single resistors all kind of installed here. You can see things are going much better than last time. Now, these resistor network bridges, I wanted to kind of bring some attention to. As far as I can tell with the research that I have done, the RN3 resistor network is the only one that really matters which direction you install it. But I think I'm going to do the same for all of them. But if you look on this, I don't know if you'll be able to see it or not, probably not. But there's some writing on it, and then on this very last pin there's a dot. I don't know if you can see that or not, but if we find RN3 on the board here, which is here, there is a square pad on RN3, and the dot should line up with the square pad on RN3. I don't know. Like I said, I think the only one that really matters as far as I have been able to find is RN3, but you never know. So I'm going to go ahead and I'll solder in. There's, I don't know, probably 5 of these, 6 of them in total. I'm going to solder them all in with the dot on the square. As far as I know, that's the way they're supposed to be soldered in, and that's the way I'm going to do it. So we will get that done. There we have it. All of the resistors are soldered to the board. So you can see you've got your resistor networks here, and then your, just single resistors all kind of on the board and soldered. I am very much happier with the way that these solders are turning out, with the tiny bit nicer soldering station instead of just the cheap Amazon one. Now, next on the list, according to the Speeduino manual, would be all the diodes and LEDs. So I'm going to go ahead, we'll dump this baby back out. We'll sort through this again and find all of the diodes. Capacitor and capacitor. Okay, so I will show you the diodes. They are, I think you call them polarized, I think is the term for it. But anyways, this diode here goes to D4. So I'm gonna go ahead, I'll bend these pins over. This is how I do it anyways. I bend the pins over like this. And then if you look, you can see there is a little silver stripe on the diode. That is the, let's find the D4 here. D1, D2, D5, D6. Oh, I got pressure now. Pressure, D4. Okay. So if you look on the board, there's a white line on the board. If you can see that. I think you can see that. Here's D4. There's a white line underneath of it. The white line on the board needs to line up with the white line on the diode. So that makes it kind of easy and simple to remember. And that should pretty much be it, if I remember correctly. Come on. So the diodes have a longer leg and a shorter leg. Shorter diode leg is the cathode, is what they call it. And the cathode goes in the square peg of the PCB. So that's simple enough. I'm going to make mine nice and flush. I'm going to attempt to anyways. So yeah, I'm going to go ahead and get these all soldered in, and I'll see you then. We've got the diodes pretty well soldered on there. There's a couple that I wish I would have gotten a little hotter, but I think it'll work. So this is called, or it's labeled the diode TVS, which I'm not quite sure, but either way, it's this little microchip looking circuit board dealy. And this goes in IC2, which is this feller here. And if you look at the board, there's a little notch in the board, and there is also a notch in the component. And those two basically line up, and you solder her in. We'll do this one live. A little pressure, and we can screw it up. So I always leave, there's usually a little residual solder on the tip. I usually leave that on the gun when it's in the holder, and then before I'm going to solder again, I will wipe it off with my little Brillo pad, brass shavings, whatever you want to call it. And then basically just touch the pad for a second, add a little solder, and then leave it on for a second, and then back off. And then the flux will do the rest. The biggest issue I had the first time I tried this was, I don't know if that iron that I had wasn't getting hot enough, but it would not melt the solder like instantly, like it needs to. And I honestly think my biggest issue with that other board is I think I cooked it. I think it like delaminated and had issues. So here's, you can see I just did those 8 pins in, 30 seconds. And they're nice and shiny, silver, so I think we're coming a long way from the first one. So there's that pile of stuff. Now let's see what they want us to do next. So after the diodes, it says capacitors, and then there is a special note that C14 and C16 are polarized capacitors, which means that they need to go in the correct way. The capacitor should be marked with a plus sign on one side, and then on the PCB there will be a positive side that is indicated by a line on the capacitor symbol. So I'll go ahead and let's go ahead and get all the capacitors out of the box.
Capacitor. So that's C4, which is not one of the polarized ones. I got a bunch of capacitors, so I'm going to go ahead and try to find the C14 and C16.
Which is basically just the bigger ones, I think. But either way, here's C4, which this doesn't say that it's polarized, but I mean, there are, you know, spots. Basically, it tells you which way it needs to go in. So C4, if you can see here, I don't know if it'll focus on it or not. Oh man. But anyway, looks like the longer leg is the positive. So if we find C4 on the board, C4 is up here in the corner. You can see there's a little plus sign underneath of the C4. So I'm going to go ahead and line up C4 with the positive, and then we'll bend these pins over and we'll solder that bad boy on. And I'm going to do that with the rest of the capacitors. This is there's quite a few to solder, so this could take a second. So the next section is going to be the header pins, and that's basically the pins that connect the Arduino board to the Speeduino. So this is going to sit on top of this board like so, and what I am going to do is I'll put these shorter pins, they go into the board like so. So I'll get those soldered in and we'll see what happens. I've got all the header pins soldered onto the board. So basically so what you do is you take this feller. This starts off as a big long stick. I don't have any more of them, but basically you just take your snips and you cut it to whatever length you need, and you insert it in the board here and then solder away. And then as far as all the jumper headers is what they call them, and it took me way too long to figure this out, but once you get this together, there's jumper headers here that you need to put like little jumper pins on, and that's kind of how you configure your trigger wheels and some other things. And you put those in with the same kind of pick your own size plastic pin header deal, and there should be on the NO2C board, there's 5 total. There should be 3 pins and 2 pins, and that's pretty much that. Then next it's telling you to put the 40 pin connector in, which should be like that. Where are you? Right here. So this is your 40 pin right here. So there's little tabs. Can you see this? There's little tabs on one end of it, So that's probably a pretty good shot right there. And then there's little holes on the end of the board. This is where that connector goes. There's little tabs and there's little holes. So you can only put that in there one way. It only fits on the board flush one way. And basically put that in, flip it over, and then you got some soldering to do. Got the connector, the main board connector soldered on. Like I said, you know, once you get kind of the hang of it, you can really, you know, I bet that took 30 seconds. It's actually, you can kind of cruise through it pretty quick. So after you get that in, you're going to do your IC sockets. So we'll go ahead and dig those out. Man, we're running out of soldering to do. So your IC sockets are for the, if you're going to have a VR conditioner, and then what else? Stepper motor, I believe. So we'll get those tossed on quick and then go from there. We've got the IC sockets installed. That's basically these fellers over here. This would be for your VR conditioner if you had one. And then these are for, I believe, the stepper motors if you had like a idle air control you need to control. But I'm not doing that because this is going on a motorcycle, and we'll just run the idle screw. But after that, I'm not sure what it means by screw terminal. What we got here, transistors, and then basically voltage regulators. There you go. But we'll put these on next. This is a Q7 transistor and another driver. So we'll toss these on and then we'll go on to the voltage regulator. Well, all we've got left now are the voltage regulators. There is one voltage regulator that is by itself, and that is U1, which that feller goes up here in the corner like so. And if you see, there are like a square with 3 squares in it, I guess 3 rectangles. That is where the heatsink goes. So it goes in here like this. There's also a dot that lines up with the square pad. Toss that baby in there and solder away. Well, that's all the voltage regulators soldered on. I guess I can kind of try and show you what underneath of here looks like. This has gone much smoother than last time. I don't know if I can tell you. I can kind of show you the difference here. It's not good the first go around. So much happier with the results of this. The only thing I can tell you about the voltage regulators here is obviously the heatsink goes with the square on the end, and these, I don't know what you'd call them, the pieces that stick through the board are quite a bit thicker than most of the other components, so you have to heat them up for a little longer. When I say a little longer, I mean like 2 seconds, 3 seconds instead of a second, to get the solder to kind of melt the flux on the board. So I think that is it, except for a map sensor. The map sensor needs to get soldered on, and then it actually gets bolted to the board. So that's a pretty self-explanatory deal too. That goes up here, like that goes on here this way. I was telling you incorrectly, which means that I put it on incorrectly on the other board too. So this is kind of how I'm gonna go about it. Maybe. Bend this baby over to where I can get it soldered, and then run these screws through. There's some screws here. We'll tighten these down first and then solder it down. There we go. Looks nice. It's good. Ooh. That's good. That's good. That's good. Maybe. There we go. And get that baby Passed on. No, I think I'm going to put the plastic nut. Yeah, screw it. Shouldn't be shorting anything out. But we'll solder that baby on, and then we'll plug this thing in, and hopefully it works. There we have it. Finished product. Now, I think I started this 7 o'clock-ish. It's 9:30 now, so not too bad. 2.5 hours.